Processing. Welcome to BS session number 147. By air or boat, truck or tracks, online or on foot, to protect and to conserve, to investigate and observe. Let's look into the lessons and wisdom, whims and woes of a career spent keeping poachers on their toes.
Because I have a shotgun and rifle that I use for, and 22 gauge that I use for ptarmigan, moose, and black bear.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
You're listening to your weekly dose of BS, Ballistically Speaking. The Ballistically Speaking Podcast.
All right. I just want to give a shout out to our American listeners on this Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you. And for our Canadian listeners, happy Friday. So
Derek,
yes.
What are we doing today?
Today we are talking to a Mr. Jim Mitchell, a retired Alberta Game Warden and author. I'll get you give yourself a quick introduction there, Jim, and then we'll go through our ad reads.
Oh, good seeing you, Derek. Good seeing you, Mike, and thanks for having me on your podcast. So, just a quick introduction. I was a game warden, or officially in Alberta, it's called a Fish and Wildlife Officer, but internationally, and most people around the world know it as a game warden. But I was a Fish and Wildlife Officer for 38 years. Throughout the province of Alberta. Station started in Barrhead, so we had talked earlier, covered that West Country through Fort Assiniboine and up towards Whitecourt. Spent a couple of years there and then transferred down to Red Deer, where I covered the Red Deer district to the east and then a lot to the west towards like Caroline or Rocky Mountain House, Caroline through there. And then High River, spent 15 years, I guess, in that High River area where we went up to the Calgary city limit boundaries and then west into Kananaskis and then out towards Vulcan. So we covered large areas, and from there ended up opening the new district of Sundre back in about 1998, I guess it was, and spent 10 years there before transferring for my final transfer down to Lethbridge, where I spent 10 years in Lethbridge, kind of looking after field operations for like southern Alberta from Calgary south to Montana and then BC over to Saskatchewan. So it's kind of a quick rundown of my career and the locations that I was stationed in.
Awesome. Well, Mike, let's kick it off with some ads.
I guess we'll pay the bills tonight quickly. So we are brought to you by our friends over at Callsign 66, Canada's best rifle training. Welcome to the Brotherhood. Book a course now at callsign66.ca and follow them on Instagram at callsign66, all one word, and on Facebook at C/S66.
And we're also brought to you by a Ribstone Gunsmithing, craftsmanship done right. Contact Oscar at ribstonegunsmithing.ca and breathe life back into any firearm. Check out Oscar's book titled Rust Bluing in the 21st Century. Find it on Amazon. And Oscar actually just sent me in the mail today an old 22 barrel that he relined for me. So he's helping me breathe life back into that firearm. So that's nice.
And we're also brought to you by Marsh Scopes Canada. The Dion optical design line of rifle scopes has a scope for all your hunting and shooting needs. Find Doug and Niza at marchscopes.ca. And just want a quick little reminder, we still have that March FX 5x42 High Master Tactical with the illuminated reticle and locking turrets. Normally this will run you about $5,300, but we have her on for $4,600. So if you want interested in that, get a hold of Doug and Niza at marchscopes.ca.
And Apex Optics. Well, today's one of those days we can pick up some great sales. Their Black Friday sale runs 12:01 a.m. Friday to 11:59 p.m. Sunday Mountain Standard Time. Everything is on sale site-wide. Save 15 to 30%. including the brand new lineup of Apex SX accessories. Limited time savings once this weekend ends. These offers are gone. Gear up, lock in your optics, and head into next season fully geared up. The official optics of Precision Rifle Series. This is your chance to pick up the official binoculars of the Precision Rifle Series at the best pricing of the year.
And we're also brought to you by EM Precision Rifles in Vickerville, Alberta, building Canada's finest precision rifles. Find Shane and Steve on Facebook, Instagram, and on their website at emprifles.ca. If it's precision hunting, varmint hunting, PRS, NRL hunter, or ELR, EM can set you up with the right rifle build.
Bolt Action Coffee, bringing specialty coffee to the precision shooting world. Boasting coffee cupping scores of 88.5 on a 100 scale. Bolt Action Coffee is unmistakably a premium coffee. Order coffee and merchandise at boltactioncoffee.com.
And we're also brought to you by Odell Engineering. Pick up a Canuck shotgun, Brigade rifle, and Apex ammunition from your local distributor and tell them Phil sent you. Look them up on Instagram, Facebook, and on their website at odellengineeringlimited.com. Just released is the Canuck Recon 3. We got your flip-up sights, mag-fed, pump action, and a whole lot of fun in one package.
And also, just to keep an eye out, Odell Engineering may have some new products in the new year, so stay tuned. And we're also brought to you by Sterling Arms International, home of the R18 Mark III and R1 Mark IX. They may be down, but they're not out. Stay tuned for the latest updates. Haven't heard anything recent, but I will be talking to JR soon.
There we go.
All right, got those out of the way.
Get that out of the way early.
Yes.
It's Friday.
I'm going to start the questions off with a pretty deep one. How many near-death experiences have you had during your career?
Start off light.
Start off.
Yeah,
light.
yeah. Let's start off really light. Holy shit! You know what? That's kind of a funny question because I've never figured it out, but I did figure out that I had like at least 9 of them. And when I was getting close to retirement, I started looking and going all these near-death experiences that I'd had. And I started thinking about the old myth about the 9 lives of a cat. And I thought, you know what? Once I hit 9, I thought, okay, it's time to start thinking about retirement. And so there's a minimum of 9, Derek, but yeah, I'm sure there's quite a few more, but yeah, 9 when I quit counting.
There might be 1 or 2 more that just aren't as permanent as the others. So
Right.
have you ever used your sidearm during your career?
In what regards, Derek? Like we used our sidearms, basically daily. You know, once we were issued sidearms back in about 1998 or so. When I first number of years of my career, we were issued like 30-06s and then 12 gauge shotguns, but we never had sidearms till about 1998 when we were issued like 357 Magnums. And they were designed and tested for dealing with problem bears. So they did lots of testing back at that time, and they determined that the 357 was the best, caliber for dealing with like grizzly bears and black bears. And so we started using those firearms strictly for bears. And then when we weren't dealing with bears, we would have to take them off, put them in a lockbox, and then put them in another lockbox in our trucks. And then we'd drive around and do our enforcement patrols and without a sidearm on them. But so as time went on and we were, eventually with the political climate, we were enabled to wear our sidearms on a permanent basis. So when I say daily, it was more for injured wildlife that we would dispatch on the side of the roads or anything that was injured. So and as far as other reasons and stuff, very seldom did we have to actually pull them and I never had to use them on anything except for wildlife.
which is good.
Yes,
Thankfully.
yeah. That's a nice way to end your career when you knew. I had a couple close calls with kind of, hairy situations and stuff, but
Mhm.
fortunately, I never did have to, pull a trigger on anything that was except for wildlife.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also a very interesting aspect as a game warden is um you're dealing with people that are armed quite typically.
Yes, yeah,
Whereas
and
police officers not so much.
no,
So,
and and
mhm,
and and I remember, the first 20 years of my career when we weren't armed, and we'd have say coffee with a policeman, and they would just shake their heads and go, how can you be working out there at night, dealing with armed people when you weren't even armed yourself? So,
mhm,
and it's something we didn't really think about too much. If we, got into a bad situation where, I did have a few over my career that we would have our long arms ready, when we were
mhm.
dealing with them. But yeah, until we actually were officially armed, and looking back at it now, I just shake my head sometimes on some of the situations that we dealt with, being unarmed.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is erratic people, erratic animals, and close quarter
Right.
situations, and in remote places too. Like I think we take for granted now. If I go in the back country, even a lot of places now, cell service is prevalent, or if not, like GPS communications. I have a very budget-friendly GPS communicator. That's basically a GPS text machine interfaces through my phone. So
Mhm.
really, it's hard to be places where there's no communications readily available.
Yeah.
But imagine early in your career, obviously, only communications was really a radio, and hopefully somebody was on the other end listening. So,
Well, yeah, we had radios, but the best of times, probably three-quarters of our district, the radios wouldn't work in them.
hmm
So our communication was pretty limited,
hmm
back then. And, now with the advancement, of satellite phones and all the GPS type things, the communications are, far better than they were, when I started my career back then.
hmm
So, and then there, of course, there was no cell phones or phones to call your wife saying that you were going to be late. You got called out on another case, and
hmm
sometimes it'd be over a day before you'd get back home. So from a spouse's perspective, it there was a lot of worrisome times.
yeah, that can be pretty daunting, especially in
Yeah,
that type of career. It's not like you're working a shift at the factory and a little bit late because something broke, but which is the
right.
remote nowhere. People,
Yeah,
your superiors may not even know where you are,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
nowhere even to where to
Exactly.
start looking for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Uh, Unfortunately for my wife, her birthday was in November, so
oh,
November was a bad time of the month. So she was saying the other day that over my career, I probably missed more than half of her birthdays in
hmm
November. So she'd be sitting there waiting to call and say we were going to be late, and
yeah.
so yeah, there was a lot of fairly quiet birthday evenings.
Well, hopefully now you can really spoil her on
Yeah,
her birthday to
yeah.
make up for that.
Yeah, and I do that now.
Yeah,
So yes.
that's excellent.
In fact, her birthday was just a couple days ago. So
hmm
yeah, so that's good.
Excellent.
So how did you know you wanted to become a game warden, or what was the beginning of the career? How did you get into it?
Oh, Mike, that it started when I was a young boy, and like my dad was an ardent hunter and fisherman, and he would take me out like a lot of fathers and mothers do, and started probably as soon as I was able to hold a fishing rod. And I remember going out in the pits. My dad was a big goose and duck hunter. He was from Macklin, Saskatchewan, and we would go out every October, and he'd pull me out of school to go goose and duck hunting. So, and I remember sitting in the pits with a little, kids wind up pop gun and shooting at geese while they were taking the shotguns. As I aged a little bit and got my first shotgun, like a single shot Cooey 20 gauge, and I just really started thinking about what career was going to be. And this time I would have been like 12 or 13 years old.
Mm.
And I decided, I wanted to do something where, I was there to help wildlife for future generations, because I really enjoyed it as a kid. And I wanted my kids to enjoy it, and in perpetuity, where everybody's kids are going to be able to enjoy our fisheries and wildlife. So it was at a really young age, Mike, that I decided that, and I think at the time I called it a forest ranger, but I didn't realize what the difference was.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
as I went into high school and started talking to guidance counselors, and they kind of told me some of the different avenues to go to get into the job. And then I think it was about grade 10, we actually had a fish and wildlife officer that come into our class and I just went to school in Lacombe, Alberta, and came and gave us a talk. And it was at that point I knew that was the name of the job that I wanted to do. And
The
this
switch
started
had flipped.
Yeah, this started gearing my courses that I needed towards, getting into college. And right out of high school, I applied to go to Lethbridge College, and got in, I think, that winter semester, and did my stint in Lethbridge. And when I got out, it was a really competitive field to get into, where you'd get like a lot of applications for just a few jobs. And so I graduated, worked in the oil patch for a year. And then one day I got a call saying that, after some interviews that I passed the interview, and that I was going to be stationed in Barhead. So at probably what I would have been, say 21 years old then, I started my career on the opening day of deer season in Barhead. So and from that, and my shift started at 6:00 at night on the 26th of October. And that's pretty green. Like my family were law-abiding, hunters, so I didn't realize all the different poaching things that went on. So the very first night on the job, I actually, and my partner, my training officer, my very first ticket I ever wrote was a night hunting charge, where guys were out with a jackknife spotlight and they'd shot a calf moose, at about midnight. So that was kind of the start of my career into poaching activities. So
it was a baptism by fire.
it was.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. So green, when we'd stopped the guys coming out, they'd said, oh, yeah, no, they weren't shooting, they had no guns in their vehicle, and that the truck was just backfiring. And I was pretty gullible, and I believed them. And in the meantime, my partner, who was a very seasoned officer, had taken the other guy into his truck, and he had admitted that they had shot a calf moose. And when we went back there, the firearms were leaned up against the smoking hot calf moose, and they were going to go home and get some people and help, butcher it and haul it back out. So so that was kind of the start of my career. But yeah, Mike, I just really wanted to do something where I thought I would make a small difference. And over the years, I've traveled to countries all over the world, and where there's no wildlife at all. You go to, Vietnam or Cambodia, where they have no, law enforcement. They got no animals at all. And I just wanted to make sure that, and it plays such a small part, but hopefully it was something little where, it helps it for future generations, where we have, fish and wildlife that are available for our kids and grandkids.
Yeah, we're blessed with a very beautiful country with, a wide diversity of wildlife, and yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to keep it that way. So
exactly, and hopefully we continue to do it that way.
So, have you ever played a prank on a coworker?
A prank? Oh,
Yes.
Well, law enforcement individuals are probably pretty famous for doing pranks, but yeah, I've played some of the ones I can't mention, but which I can really laugh about inside with the other ones I played the prank on and stuff. But yeah, we over the course of the career, it's in fact. In the book, I write about a few of the ones with humor and uniform, but yeah, one of the a number of different funny ones, but one of the ones we'd had this problem black bear, and it was causing us lots of problems, and it was this time of the year. It was like November, and we were busy with hunting season, and this bear was getting into all kinds of trouble, but. To make a long story short, we eventually caught this bear, and given the circumstances, this bear was dispatched, and so we had it in the back of our truck, and we were taking it out into Kananaskis. Actually, we had a kind of an area that we could dump it into a place where nobody went into, and a fairly remote place where we dumped some carcasses, and went out there and stopped in at the local park ranger's house. He'd always invite us in for coffee, and stopped in there to have a coffee with him, but he wasn't home. He was out hunting for the day, but his truck was there, and his work truck, and went over there, and sure enough, he had locked it. So anyways, my partner and I grabbed this black bear and put it in the seat of his truck, and then put his hat on him, and left him there thinking that he was going to be home later on that day. Well, it turned out he had went away hunting. He went away pheasant hunting, I think, to Brooks for a couple of days. And when he got back, it had turned really cold, kind of like, today. And it had went to 20 below. Well, sure and lo and behold, the bear was frozen solid behind the seat of the truck and stuff. And so I got kind of quite a phone call from him, and I answered the phone, and it was, "You dirty bastard." and he says, "You owe me a tank of gas." And he had got home, it was frozen solid, and he had to start his vehicle. He had to run it 24 hours before it thawed out enough before he could get this bear out. But yeah.
Frozen in place.
We have taken trucks and hid trucks, and but yeah, there's we've played quite a few pranks over the years.
That's I gotta say that's good.
Lucky didn't get a Chinook and it turned plus 30.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
No kidding. Say we haven't brought it up yet, but it's in the title. But Jim is the author here of this book called Alberta Game Warden Behind the Badge of 172. You can find it on Amazon. What inspired you to write a book?
After like 38 years and over the course, our family has a cabin in Montana, and we'd go there and sit around the fire. And when I had what I thought was an interesting case, I'd kind of tell the story around the fire. And a few of my friends and hunting buddies said, "You should actually write a book about some of these things." And after I retired, we had went on a month-long holiday, like a Mekong Delta cruise through Vietnam and Cambodia. And when I was sitting there kind of contemplating what, my future was going to look like, I decided that, maybe I have enough stories that I can, write a book. And the intent wasn't originally to go and sell the book. I wanted to write the book just as a keepsake for my daughter. So she would have it, and then maybe her kids or grandkids down the line someplace, would see that, what grandpa did for a job, or, what, relatives thought, and kind of a few little things that had happened. So that was kind of the way the book started. And, and I've been asked, a number of times, like how long it took me to write the book. And I said 43 years. To write this book, and it was like 38 years of experience, and then it took me 5 years to write the book. Once I started putting pen to paper and going through the whole process of finally getting a book published on it.
Did you keep a diary that you kind of referenced, or kept some cases that you're able to jog your memory? Like
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
the process for that?
So with all law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers, you keep pretty detailed notes in a notebook. And so when you get called to court, that you can recall what had happened, through your notebook. So I did that. I had like 38 years worth of notebooks that I went through. I'd kept a number, like some really big cases that I had. I kept files on those so I could get real good details about the files. And so going through those, and I combed through those for months and months, going through different stories to try and figure out what would be interesting to readers. So that's kind of what I did, and that's how I kept. And some of the stuff was recollection, but most of the stuff was, from my notebooks and what we call prosecution reports and, court briefs.
How many notebooks would you generate in a year per se?
Oh, shoot. When I retired, I had to turn my last notebooks in, and then they would keep them for 5 years, so that if there was any court cases within that 5 years, then you could get them back. And I think in the last year, I think I probably turned in like maybe 6 or 7 notebooks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, notebooks. So and that time I wasn't in the field as much, but still when I was having a particularly bad day or something in the office, my reprieve was to get out into the field and go check some hunters or fishermen. So that really was my passion. So from there, I'd come up with some cases and had the notebooks. But I have literally probably 3 large boxes full of notebooks that I referred to over the course of writing this book.
That must have been going through those must have been a bit of a blast. And
it was
a
big. It was a huge trip down memory lane, because a lot of them you forget, obviously, after that many years. And so it actually was. That was the fun part, going through those and deciding how I'd write the story that it would be, hopefully entertaining to some readers and stuff. And some of them, my wife would come out of the office and just start or see me laughing, and she would ask what I was laughing about. So I was telling her about, some of the stories that had happened and, what I'd just been reading about. So, but yeah, that was the best part of writing the book, actually, was going through those and determining which ones I was going to write about.
Yeah. That's awesome. The writing process itself for you was not so bad. Did you have help or?
Well, yeah, my wife helped me quite a bit, and but I wrote the book in rough, and then a cousin of mine, actually, he was an RCMP for 41 years, named Bill Sharp, and he had written a couple books. So after I'd went through revisions for about the 10th time, and I just couldn't read it anymore, I sent it to him, and he went through them and made some suggestions. And then our final stage was we actually hired an editor out of Okotoks. Her husband was a Calgary City policeman, and she made the final revisions on the book before it actually went to print. So there was, each story would have been read probably 15 or 20 times before it was ever published. So yeah, and once you read a story a number of times, you start skipping words, and you just couldn't do it justice, and find where you had missed a comma here or did something there, or how the whole story came together. So there was a lot of people involved in reading it, before it actually went to print.
Yeah, a fresh set of eyes is necessary to really work out the fine details.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've all experienced that. So,
yes. Yeah. All right. We'll get into another topic here that will be lots to talk about. In light of the Bella Coola attack, what is the process for dealing with bears that have attacked people?
Oh, the process is a really detailed investigation. So when we would get, and I speak from experience. I was part of what we called the bear response team. So I was a predator response team leader. So a number of individuals in each province, BC or Alberta, they were kind of specially trained to deal with mauling or fatality type situations. So we got a little bit of advanced training on not only different trapping techniques, but also evidence collection for DNA. So when we would get the call, we would respond like we would on any call to make the determination, what had happened and do a scene investigation, a site investigation on the case. So from there, we would take photographs, we would take samples, we would do a whole bunch of stuff to determine. And if a determination was made that a bear was responsible, like in Bella Coola, and their situation was obviously different because they have survivors that lived and could tell the story about, I'm assuming, what had happened. And then from there, the investigating officer would get a team together. He would contact their supervisor and get a predator response team together. So, and they would have been called in. And again, I imagine, BC, the Bella Coola situation from, reading some news clips and I have some people over there that I worked with that, I talked to a little bit about it. They bring those individuals in, and time is of the essence on something like that because, bears can leave the area fairly quickly. And weather plays a big role. They could get snow, they could get rain that would wash away this stuff. And then they would have taken DNA samples is a big thing of the wounds. So we'd get swabs of saliva from the wounds on the individuals. And I believe that's the process they're going through right now, is where they have captured a couple of the bears, and then they will take DNA from the bear. So they'll go and take either some hair samples or blood samples from the bear, and then in their forensic laboratory, then they'll analyze it to see if the DNA found in the wounds of the individuals match the ones actually found or from the bear. So, and then a determination is made on the fate of the bears, after that particular one. So, and lots of factors come into play on, what happens to, a bear in a situation like that. So,
that's another thing is it's not like identifying a human suspect where you can, describe their height. They're wearing this hat. They're driving this truck with this license plate. It's no, it's this is a grizzly bear. It was big or is it small or is a black bear, and obviously you can't ask the bear if it did it either. That's the other tricky part. So.
And it's interesting, Derek, where some bears have some real distinct characteristics about them, and we had one case where it was a mauling fatality, where it was a individual from the United States that was up hunting, and he was by himself and mauled and killed and stuff. But as we went and started seeing other bears, and it was in the fall, so then the bear actually, before we caught it that year, had hibernated and stuff. So in the meantime, we had got everything, all the DNA results back and stuff, and we'd caught one of the cubs and found out the DNA from it, and had seen, we didn't get the sow and the other cub at the time, but later we actually spotted it from a helicopter when we were doing it. We knew that was the bear, responsible, for it. And the bear, determination was made to aerial gun the bear and then destroy it. There is a lot to a grizzly bear mauling situation, and a lot of and it's obviously hard on family members and hard on the public, and extremely hard on officers that are investigating it, because it is a fairly gruesome thing to observe and witness and stuff. That like I said, and I've seen a number of them over my career, and they always, the odd time they come back to haunt you with, in the middle of the night. So yeah.
Yeah. I just want to address Yukikazi's commentators. You guys have to deal with black bears up there, or is it mostly brown grizzlies? In Alberta, we have black bears and grizzly bears. Not necessarily any brown bears, but we got a combination of both.
Right.
And I will bring it up. There's been more and more conversation about grizzly conservation in Alberta and BC. In your experience, what are some factors to consider to reduce negative bear interactions, and what can people and governments do to improve this relationship?
That's a really tough question, a really good question.
That's the
That's the million dollar question at least.
Yeah, it is and stuff, and it's funny because the last couple of days I've been hearing conversations about numbers, numbers of bears in BC and numbers of bears in Alberta, and realistically, we don't have a real good grasp on numbers. We can go out and they do these DNA tests with these scratch poles, and they try to make determinations on numbers, but in my beliefs, we don't have a good grasp on numbers at all. So we do different things, different mitigating things to stop, hopefully, slow down the interactions where, with education about, when you're out camping or hiking, to carry your bear spray and, make noise. And the biggest thing probably is educating the public on some of those things, because and some people will say, well, geez, I don't carry bear spray, I just carry a gun. A gun's way more effective than bear spray on a bear. And until you've actually experienced a charging grizzly bear coming on you, there's very few people that would be steady enough to ever shoot a bear and stuff, because it's coming at you fast, and it's coming at your hard, and your heart's beating, and yeah. So our education for somebody that's not experienced in it would be, we feel, or I shouldn't say we, I feel, bear spray would be way more effective, because I've experienced the other end of it, and and it's pretty traumatic experience of a full-blown charge, with a grizzly bear. Your heart's beating, and there's lots going on with your body at that time. So I challenge a lot of people in this. They got this new program starting this year, and I basically shook my head when I heard about it, where they were going to be bringing in, people like hunters on a draw to actually deal with problem bears. And in fact, I couldn't believe it when I first heard about it, and I started to do a bit of research and phoning a few guys, and sure enough, it was in place that they're doing that, and where they'll call on a draw somebody to come in, and basically it's shooting a bear in an area. We don't know if we're shooting the right bear, and then if that bear gets wounded, guess who gets called to go in after a wounded bear? And that will be the Fish and Wildlife officer, the local Fish and Wildlife officer, and going after a wounded bear is never fun. It's in a real extremely dangerous situation. So it just would have been better to have enough staff to deal with it, in-house with experienced guys. And then you do your DNA tests, and then that if a bear deserves to be destroyed and euthanized, that you have the right bear, versus just going and shooting a random bear in the area. Because as we all know, there's enough bears around, and to get the right bear, the only way of checking it is through DNA. So
you gotta be trained in that kind of stuff. And back to the firearm and bear spray conversation, I think regardless, I think both you should be in that situation prepared and like trained, like I want to say mentally, like dry firing. Like if you go through the motions before and kind of build a muscle memory, I think that's the best way to do it. Because if you're trying to figure it out the first time, trying to figure out how to use that bear spray when you've never actually used it, having to practice
Yeah.
using it dry.
Yeah.
Figuring it out on the fly while a bear is charging
Yeah.
at you is probably not the time to figure it out.
No,
So,
and through our training with firearms, we go and we dry fire and fire thousands of rounds a year,
mhm,
in our firearms requalification. So it's exactly what you said, Derek. It's muscle memory. We could do it
mhm,
with our eyes closed in pitch black and know exactly where our holster was and our Glocks, and we did it so many times you could do it where, and I'm guilty of this, where I go out now and I carry bear spray, and I'd be one of those guys, I'll take it out a few times and try it. But yeah, when it come down to a full out quick bear charge, I'd be fumbling like, a lot of people because of that exact reason, where I haven't practiced enough, and like we did with our firearms.
yeah. And that's also another thing. Also, when I think of hunters and bear interactions, is again, hunting in bear territory. Obviously, you're generally hunting, ungulates, and you're trying to be as quiet as possible. Whereas, if you're just hiking around, well, it's easy to make a lot of noise to scare away bears.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're hunting, you're trying to be as quiet as possible, not to scare away the wildlife.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, you can
Yeah.
have a surprise, some wildlife, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
And most of the ones I went on, over the years, it was a surprise situation too, whether, a lot of them were hunters, and it's exactly what you said, where you're in the bush and you're being quiet and you're trying to, stalk an animal. And in both the cases I'm thinking about, they'd covered themselves in urine, elk urine, and to mask the human scent. Well, you kind of think of it from a bear's perspective, and you're going, okay, it's tough, but yeah. And
Mhm,
or mountain bikers, they're quiet, they're fast, and they'll come across a sow and a cub quick, and they'll shock it. And those ones, we look at the two different ones, whether it's predatory or defensive attacks, where a lot of the times on mountain bikers or hikers, it was more of a defensive attack, where they were just, a quick swat and off they were going, just, either protecting a kill they'd made or
mhm.
their offspring.
Yeah. What is the relationship like between grizzly bears and black bears? How do they interact?
Yeah, they aren't friends at all. So yeah, so if they're in there at all, that grizzly bear will either kill the black bear or force it out. So they don't seem to cohabitate too closely at all,
Mhm,
together. So yeah, and yeah, a lot of times you'll get the grizzly bears that'll kill the black bears. And in fact, we had a case, and it's actually, the bear is mounted and on display at the Lethbridge College with his big grizzly bear over a black bear that it killed. So, but
mhm,
yeah, they don't coexist very well at all.
mhm. So that's another curious thing I thought of. Like, it's like, well, if we do in fact have a growing grizzly bear population, I think we're going to see a detriment to the black bear population, that
Right.
have occupied, a lot of territory for a long time
Mm.
now. So
Yeah. And what we're seeing with increased, and nobody's going to argue that the grizzly bear numbers haven't increased. I've seen it where when I was
mm,
in High River, we had trapped two young grizzly bears that were like 5 kilometers from the Calgary city limits.
oh
And
wow,
back then it was unheard of. To have a grizzly bear that close was absolutely unheard of. And now it's common occurrence. They'll get grizzly bears in the city, and they'll get grizzly bears in places. The year that I'd left, we had a grizzly bear and two cubs, like, 60 or 70 kilometers south of Lethbridge, in the wide open, not a tree. You couldn't see a tree. It's on the wide open prairie. And they'd
mm,
stick to the little creek bottoms and stuff down towards the border, the United States border, by, down towards Milk River. So they're expanding. They're territories because of the numbers, and they're, the big boars will force out the little boars, and then the big boars, the sows will leave with their cubs to protect their cubs, because the boars will, try and kill the cubs of the sows. So we're really starting to see, expanded areas where normally you wouldn't, see grizzly bears, 20 years ago.
Yeah, that sprawl effect. Because yeah, that's another interesting factor is is bears will push out other bears.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
interesting kind of exponential effect.
Yes, exactly.
Have you ever done undercover work as a game warden, and what does that look like?
Oh, you know what? We actually have a section, a major investigations section, within Fish and Wildlife that deal with like serious resource violations.
Mhm.
So I have never done undercover work myself, but I was part of what we called the surveillance team. So this team, it'd be a team of officers again that were trained that if we had to go into a situation where there was an undercover officer or operator, and then we were there to, if it was say a sale of something, say a sale of some fish or a sale of meat, then our surveillance team would follow that individual and then see where they were taking the meat, or whether it was to make a sale to a restaurant or to get evidence that would prove our case. So we had one situation where we had got information that this outfitter guide was bringing in illegal hunters from Mexico, and that they were going to be baiting grizzly bears in a non-baiting area where there was no season. So then the surveillance team would go in and then pick up the people as they left the airport, and then follow them till they actually got the evidence they needed to have uniformed officers come in and make arrests on these individuals. But myself, I've never been, we did plainclothes work. There's a difference between being a plainclothes officer and watching somebody do something. An undercover officer is somebody that'll actually get in with a poaching group and be one of the, the poachers. But I never did that in my career at all.
Okay, but obviously you cooperated with them on investigations to, further investigation.
Exactly. And there's been some like really large ones within the province of, Alberta with, people, shooting in excess of 50 moose in a fall and turn around selling them. So there's some extremely large poaching operations that go on, some that you shake your head at, that, the most of the public you wouldn't understand. In fact, when my father-in-law read the book that I wrote, and he came back and said, I've known you for like 40 years and I had no idea you did what you did and stuff. So a lot of the general public, are under the impression that officers go out and they check somebody for a fishing license or something like that. And there's just so much more to it, and so many, different, high profile poaching rings that are operating, not just in Alberta, but, all over the world. And we got involved with ones that were, international in scope, where, illegal, like large amounts of illegal brown bears being taken, from the Alaska and then illegally imported into Alberta, and that, were shot, over baits or something, and, a bunch of different illegal activities in Alaska. Things all over the world that we run into, Derek.
That's interesting how, those, obviously you think checking within your district, but then there's those cases of stuff coming in or stuff trying to leave that he's a bigger web than your,
Exactly. Yeah. No,
your
exactly.
small portion of the province.
So how common is the deliberate poaching, I would call, where people are like, it's August, I want some moose, I'm going to go get one? How common is that kind of thing happening?
Very common, Mike. It happens lots. And, there's people that will break the law unintentionally. They just didn't know that, that they were breaking the law. And then there's the group of individuals that go out and purposely will shoot 10 deer in a year and not tag them. It's a way more common than you would ever imagine. So yeah, and provincially, every district runs into a number of those over the course of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So has it been getting worse, or is there peaks and valleys to the years?
Yeah, definitely peaks and valleys. And the way over my career we tried to combat that was, and the only way you could do it is have some kind of deterrence that was financially hurt the individual for doing it. So or jail time. We've had individuals that are going to jail of some of the serious stuff that's going on. So if you do something, it's like anything legally, if there's no deterrence to what you do, you're going to continue doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent large amounts of time over the years educating prosecutors and judges why it was important. You give the large area that officers have to deal with, and 200 plus thousand kilometers of roads, and we have just over 100 officers, and why, if there isn't a deterrence to these poachers, people continue to do it. And like I say, we'll get some good judges that really understand that, and then give a real deterrent fine. And on the other hand, we'll get a commercial operation that'll make $100,000 on a transaction of wildlife, and then they're fined $5,000. So that's pretty good. Would that stop you from going out and doing it? No, it's the cost of doing business. So we got to make sure that the courts look upon it seriously enough that the penalty that they receive is more than they're profiting from their poaching activities.
Is that kind of a barrier? I just assume judges are more urban type folk. In my mind, I luckily I have not had a whole lot of interaction with judges, but is that kind of a somewhat true statement?
You'll get some of the rural guys that when they deal with the cases that we deal with, and it's so. The first part is educating the prosecutor about why this is important. And then the prosecutor's job, after he proves the case, is to educate the judge on why it's important that these guys get a really good slap on the wrist, because because if they don't, for the reasons that I said, the deterrence isn't there. So hopefully, and a lot of prosecutors do a really good job once you've spent some time with them educating the judges. And in fact, I had one case where we had prosecutors that didn't really understand how our surrogate operations worked, like our decoy operations. She had a couple in court, but she didn't really understand how they worked. And she asked if she could actually come out on an actual surrogate operation that we were running. Yeah. So we had her out there, went through the whole process. And during the course of that process, we had an individual that, I think that night we got like 3 different people that, shot wildlife illegally. But this one individual had shot this surrogate mule deer buck out of the window of his truck. He had no license for the buck. And when we looked in his truck up the road, he had even shot a lynx, and he had a lynx in the back. So she could see that how professionally these surrogate operations were set up, that, they were safe for the violator, they were safe for the officer, and safe for everybody in the community, that, when the shots went off, they didn't go into anybody's farmyard, but maybe into a hillside. And so all those places are picked. But as soon as we did that, and she understood the whole process, for a number of years, she was our prosecutor and just did a bang up job. In fact, I don't think we ever lost a trial with her, prosecuting, because she knew exactly the whole process. So we took the time to educate her on that. And then she took the time to actually educate the judge on why and how and the reasons for, running these operations.
Yeah, she could deliver a more convincing case. And yeah, that that one evening or one day, made the world of
Right.
difference having boots on experience. I think
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
reading the book is interesting. What's the average number of shots that a poacher will take at a decoy in your
Oh,
mind?
gee. And it's actually, it's pretty funny because when you're watching somebody do that,
Hmm.
they'll take the first shot and then they'll look at the deer and they'll kind of cock their head a little bit going, geez, why didn't it fall? And they'll shoot
Didn't
again.
even
And
move.
then,
Yeah.
yeah, and then they start to question what's going on. So probably, Derek, I've never figured out the average, but maybe three. And we had one case where we had
Yeah.
three young guys come out and they were shooting at this deer, and the other guy thought they had one gun between the three of them. So
Mhm.
he took 3 shots, passed the gun to his buddy who took 3 shots, and then passed it to the third one, and he took 3 shots before our takedown patrol units could get in and stop them from shooting it and stuff. So it kind of varies where
Not,
one person, a pretty experienced hunter, will shoot, and when it doesn't fall, he knows, something's
yeah.
wrong here. So,
That's
yeah, it's interesting to be able to observe the
mm,
reaction of these individuals, when they found out that, they've been, by one guy referred to it, he was duped by a rubber deer. So, but yeah. And his second comment to the judge was, that's a pretty expensive fine for shooting a rubber deer. So, yeah.
that three person one gun situation, that reminds
Yeah.
me of like a
Yeah.
Three Stooges skit. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
here, you try.
It was and stuff. And we actually had one case again similar to that. And when they seen the trucks come, they hid the gun in the grass. And anyways, we watched this whole thing happen. And when we ran the guys' names through our database for violators, we had caught the same 2 individuals shooting a decoy deer the year before, so they hadn't learned. So it's
Oh God.
some of these representations of wildlife are pretty exact, mounted by taxidermists that, I've showed pictures of these to officers and they couldn't tell that they weren't real pieces of wildlife. So
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. I was
yeah.
also reading in the book too, and you mentioned hawks and eagle surrogates. Like, obviously, he's the conventional deer, mule deer, but some unconventional animals like that. I was kind of wondering if there's a backstory to that.
Yeah, we've had over the course of the years where we had a real issue with individuals going in and shooting hawks and eagles for their feathers. And then so they were being trafficked, and they were making large amounts of money on these eagles and hawks. And we knew, we had a pretty good idea who was doing it. We knew obviously the area that it was happening in and stuff. So we actually set out a surrogate eagle and to catch them in the act of doing that. And the end result was there was a fairly large group of them doing this and selling them, and that was the lead-in point of getting into finally busting this big trafficking ring on eagles. But then the last few, and I don't know of any of the last few years, I'm sure there's probably some of it going on, but that was a case that we actually used a surrogate to combat and get some information on who was doing it. And then potentially in cases like that, we would have if that happened and we knew it was happening, then the surveillance team could do some follow-up work on where these were going.
Yeah, you can
So
kind of follow the individual and
yeah,
find out the network and then
yeah.
deconstruct it that way.
Yeah.
So
So
okay.
yeah. So for surrogates, the province basically has surrogates for everything. We've utilized. We had a problem one year with illegal pheasant hunting. So a surrogate pheasant was something as simple as a surrogate pheasant. Was
Hmm.
set up, and we've did them with grizzly bears where we had guys actually shoot the surrogate grizzly bears. So they're being every piece of wildlife imaginable can be used in a court case tested surrogate operation.
Hmm. Yeah. I haven't figured out the
Yeah.
surrogate fish yet, though. I'm assuming
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, no, I don't
that
think so. Yeah,
that
that
one's a
that'd
little
be a
bit
tough one.
trickier.
Yeah, that'd
Maybe
be
with
a
technology, they'll have a robotic fish here
yeah. Oh yeah,
shortly.
yeah,
So
exactly.
they'll have a
Have you
homing beacon for the lure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
have
What's
you
the
caught people using suppressors before while they're poaching?
You know what? We No, the short answer is I
Just no.
haven't
Okay.
myself, but I think they have been caught. Individuals have been caught doing it, and we had a kind of an opportunity to test them out ourselves during the chronic wasting disease, where we'd go in and do a cull, and we'd went and we had suppressors that we used on. I think they had equipped like 4 different rifles, maybe, that we were using with suppressors just to try them out to see how they worked. And but nowadays, when you see the amount of suppressors and how how much better they are nowadays, I can see that there are going to be poachers that end up utilizing them more for obvious reasons, and the same way where we're getting poachers that use crossbows because at night it's quiet and they don't create a lot of attention. So
Mhm.
but myself, Mike, no, I never in my whole career charged anybody with using a suppressor.
I asked that because when we go to places like I talked to some people from Europe and they were shocked that we can't have them. I would be a big fan if we were allowed to use them for hunting. What are your thoughts about, say, like tomorrow we're going to make them legal? What would your concerns or pros cons be with that?
In an actual situation, like in a legal situation through the day, I wouldn't have any problems. But from a law enforcement officer, from a game warden's perspective, I look at kind of the opposite things. Well, how could these be used for nefarious reasons? And
Mhm.
my big concern would be poachers that are hunting outside of seasons or at night where they're doing it in a concealed situation where they don't want to be and most of the calls we got over the years is we'd get a call and say, geez, I heard a gunshot and
Mhm.
it's the season isn't open yet, maybe you should come. Like, I heard a high powered rifle shot coming from the trees by my place, where we wouldn't get those type of ones where they're when they're using the suppressors. But a law-abiding, hunter using a suppressor, I would have no problem with that whatsoever.
Mhm.
And like I said, I've shot them myself, and the ones we had back when we were doing the CWD call, they weren't great. I didn't find them great, but I had an opportunity to shoot one fairly recently, and I was surprised at how good they are now. So
Yeah. Yeah. Again, with
yeah.
technology, everything's
Yeah,
everything's improving.
everything is getting better.
How has social media played a role in investigating wildlife crimes?
Oh boy, you got some really good questions.
Thank you.
He did
Yeah,
his
well,
Spent
homework.
some,
yeah,
spent some
oh
time on this. Like I
yes,
said, I was
yeah.
looking forward to this one. So, yeah.
Well, so the social media, it's been amazing on how it's helped us solve a number of crimes. Like,
Mhm.
it's and traditionally, or quite often, a poacher cannot not brag about a big buck that he has shot.
Mhm.
And the amount of times that we have went in and seized a big buck from a social media. We had no other evidence except somebody had called in and said, geez, you better look at this Facebook post. That's not right. There's lots wrong with this Facebook post. And we actually, and part of our major investigations actually deals with that on a daily basis, where they're going through some of that stuff. So, and then that on top of, doing forensic analysis of phones and computers, where they'll go in and they'll say somebody on Facebook will put a picture of a great big buck they shot. And then when we go in and do a search warrant on it, and then, find their phone and find, it's date stamped and it's location stamped. And, and sometimes
there's that background data that a lot of people don't know about. There's a time and location.
Some of them have been some of the easiest investigations ever, so that picture just shows us a whole lot of stuff that we need to prove the case. So, but and every day it's different. And I know the fellow that does it for our department really well. And then when you hear some of the stories, you just shake your head on what they can come up with and what people do with, so it's quite interesting.
But it's not even Facebook. It's people doing like film productions that have been caught too.
Yeah. You read about that, some of these outdoor channel shows that, and they've been caught and doing nefarious things. And it's all over the world. It's an epidemic with that stuff. So, and we've seen it, the extent some people are willing to go to shoot a big animal. And it's like, it really is, they'll go to a lot of effort and a lot of money just to shoot that big animal. And whether it's legal or illegal.
It's kind of funny to think about, because you think bank, like gas station robbery, it's the worst, grainiest footage ever. And then it's a poaching thing. And well, here's their film production. They had production values. Here's the credits. Here's everything you need.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just, and we had a guy in one situation where he had I guess, he finally got the best of him, but he had shot an illegal cougar and got it mounted, and he had, shot it, outside the season and did a number of things, but he had it mounted in his house for like 15 years. And he said, every time I went by that cougar, I'd look about it and think about, this was an illegal cougar. And people that shoot animals legally, man, they have a great story and they love to tell the story, where he said, every time I had to tell the story, I had to lie. I had to lie to my friends. I had to lie to my family. And he said, and finally one day he come into the office and he said, you know what? I got to tell you something. He said, this has been eating me for a lot of years and I got to get it off my chest. So, but it's funny how people's conscience do get to them, in some points, and then some people can go and shoot all kinds of them, and they won't lose a minute's sleep over it.
That's an interesting case of their conscience catching up with them.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. What happens to seized poached meat, trophies, mounts, etc.?
So, like in some states and some provinces, they'll actually sell the proceeds of, like, antlers. They'll have an antler auction. Like, like I said, I have a cabin in Montana, and they do like an annual auction each year, for antlers. We don't do that in Alberta. So the meat, first of all, if it's edible, then it goes, we have a needy food bank, or not a food bank, a needy list. And the list comprises, and we have people in the province that need it for medical needs. So they need to have a diet that, because of the makeup of wild meat compared to fatty, beef, that they can get on this list. So we distribute the meat to these needy people, whether it's medical or people with, low incomes that can't can't afford it. But
Yeah.
we used to earlier in my career, we'd give it to old folks' homes, and then they ended up having regulations where they needed meat federally inspected, and obviously we couldn't do that. So all the edible meat is given out to needy people. The heads or animals, for instance, say cougars, for instance, then they're given to, like, for instance, Lethbridge College. We take a lot of cougars. They do autopsies on them and do different studies. They do DNA testings on them and a number of different things. So we utilize them where we can. And then the ones that we can't, then they're incinerated or destroyed.
Oh, okay.
The antlers and stuff. So yeah, we'll give them to, fish and game associations for if they need them for displays or different things like that. But all the ones that we don't are destroyed.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting.
At least it goes to some use.
Yes.
Exactly. Where the idea actually, where in Montana and some of the states, they make a lot of money from some of the antler sales that go back into, putting it into their departments for equipment or different operations that they run. So it's just the same with firearms, where, seized firearms or they aren't sold, they're destroyed, they're cut up and destroyed. So
yeah, which is unfortunate, because again, that could raise some necessary funds for conservation, if done correctly.
Exactly.
And somebody could get a decent deal on an old 270 30-06 or something. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever uncovered other crimes while investigating wildlife crimes? Like, have you uncovered like a drug operation while, doing a search for, wildlife parts?
Many times, actually. And I can, just off the top of my head, I could probably think of 3 or 4 different ones where we went in and it was a search warrant for a moose and a deer that we knew that this guy had illegally taken, and he was hanging it from the barn in his farmyard. And when we got in there, we could smell the whole thing. And when we went to the upper loft of the barn, and I think when the RCMP and their teams come out, I think they ended up seizing like 2,000 marijuana plants, from their barn. But
oh, wow.
We've had ones. I had one case where I got called out on a night hunting complaint on where they had spotlighted a deer and shot at it. And when we found the individuals and did a search of their vehicle, there was a large, like, hockey bag size of drugs, all prepackaged in the little dime bags where they were were selling these. It turned out the truck was stolen. The large duffel bag in the back full of drugs, and they were wanted for armed robbery on a bank. So, so they were like, and they were both armed with sidearms. So, so it was, so there's some like really bad guys out there. Roadblocks. We used to have a big roadblock on Highway 2. Actually, we would shut down all of Highway 2 southbound into the city of Calgary. And we'd have like 10 RCMP and 10 Fish and Wildlife, and we'd have, commercial vehicles and everything. And without exception, those check stops, when we finished them, there was a load of drugs that had been seized, coming through. So we run into, not only do we just run into like fishery or wildlife violations, but a number of impaired drivers or drugs or stolen equipment. We've come, with people with, stolen quads when we run their, their serial numbers, stolen boats, a number of different things like that, Derek.
Yeah. That's once a criminal, it seems like sometimes they're deep dived into the whole criminal world. So it's not just wildlife crimes, it is conventional crimes and vice versa.
And we did a little study once where, every wildlife violator that we caught, we ran them through the criminal database, to see. And it was surprising the amount of other criminal violations these poachers had. They weren't just poachers, but they were thieves, and they were abusers and different things. So, but you're right.
I get there's a question from one of our viewers, Spud. He asked, Jim, what is the weirdest thing you've ever found in the woods? Myself, I found a toaster nailed to a tree with a happy face on it.
Oh.
So I'm wondering if I had actually had a simpler question. Have you ever seen something a little bit off and weird that wasn't quite illegal, but made you kind of scratch your head?
Oh, gee whiz! Like, I'm just trying to think. It.
Mhm.
Hey, well, in the type of area that we patrolled and the time of day that we worked, it was amazing the amount of fun and frolic we come across. With with men and women in the bush and stuff. So that was a very common occurrence.
Somewhat
But
common occurrences.
yeah,
Some people doing the horizontal tango.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
mhm.
yeah. We found a firearm in the bush before. I'm just trying to think what some of the strangest things I might have found, but yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm gonna have to think about that one a little bit more. But yeah, that's a good question from one of your viewers.
There'll be a list for the next book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever seen any? Oh, Mike, go ahead.
I want to ask this one. So, have you anything you couldn't explain, like say lights in the sky, UFO, big hairy 8-foot Sasquatch kind of thing, anything like that? You seen anything?
No, I've never had the occasion to run into a Sasquatch and stuff, but lights we did have some, and I was sure it was some kind of UFO. And then as we watched it a little bit more, it was a foggy evening, and somebody was out illegally hunting with a spotlight. So as they were shining their spotlight, it was deflecting the light beams up into the sky. And I was with a partner, and we were both convinced. We looked at it, and it had us baffled for the longest time till we finally, ended up finding the guy that was shining the spotlight out hunting. But yeah, no, it's when you're out in the middle of the bush in the middle of the night by yourself, and you're looking around and seeing things, sometimes you really wonder. But yeah.
What am I
Stumble
seeing?
across an old cabin, you look and you thought you saw something, like that place is definitely haunted. I'm not going near it.
Yeah. Some people have told me that I'm crazy a number of times, going, you're back here by yourself and way back here dealing with this stuff. Like, you have no idea who's behind that door when you knock on that trapper's cabin, 50 miles from any road.
Yeah, there's the legend of the mad trapper for a reason, unfortunately. So
yeah, true.
What is the relationship like with trappers? Obviously, we think of a game warden, we think of some person stopping, checking in on hunters, or on a boat checking in on fishing licenses. But obviously, the trappers are part of the outdoor world that are a little bit more seclusive than the rest of the outdoors people. What's that relationship like?
That relationship, Derek, I would say we have an exceptionally good relationship with trappers. In the Trappers Association, they put on a big kind of a rendezvous thing every year where they have different competitions. We're there like as officers giving out information. We serve pancakes. We help out with a pancake breakfast. I have and one particularly good friend that was a trapper and an outfitter. And I would go out on a trapline patrol with him and use his cabin. So he would take me out, and the amount that I learned from him on different, trapping techniques. And then I would go on snowmobile and check, other trap lines, and then come, because it was a very remote location, and then come back to his cabin at night where, he had it all stocked up and the fire going, because a lot of those days you were pretty cold when you were done. So, and it's like anything, you do get the odd, trapper that, tends to break the laws, and like anything. And, but out of all the relationships we have an extremely good relationship with most trappers.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's good to hear.
And then we call those, there's two different types of trappers in the province. There's registered trappers that have their trap lines, and they're usually in more remote locations. And then our resident trappers are more of our recreational trappers that'll go out on the, slough and trap muskrats or, coyotes or foxes and stuff. So, but, the registered trappers and stuff, we have a very good relationship with.
Mm-hmm. What's the largest bust that you've ever been part of, or what are some of the larger operations that you were a part of taking down?
Oh shoot! So I was on a number of different ones when I was with the surveillance team. So with like major investigations, they had a lot of like very large busts and stuff like that. So, and but some of the ones that I dealt with, like on my own, where we didn't have major investigations, we had one that was fairly large. In fact, it dealt with quite a large number of elk, bighorn sheep, antelope, deer, and it was a group of people that were going out under the guise of hunting, and they were shooting all these illegal animals. But when they were checked by officers, they had one individual that accompanied them that had Aboriginal hunting rights. So then they were covering their kills with this one, Aboriginal hunter, and then they were going in and selling these heads, especially the sheep heads, to larger corporations. So we knew that one sheep head had been sold for like $20,000,
Wow.
to an oil company, and then when we ended up doing the search warrants, we ended up seizing another couple of elk heads that had been sold, but were just in the process of getting taxidermized, and at the end of the day, I think we ended up laying close to 100 charges on these groups and it was actually not groups. It was one Aboriginal hunter and one non-Aboriginal. It was the white individual that was doing all the trafficking. So
Yeah.
so that and then it started off really innocently, where we had got a call from a guy that said he worked on this guy's vehicle, and he had to replace the engine on his truck, and he offered him to pay him in a sheep head. So when you shoot something like that, you can't sell it, and that's the way this whole investigation started. Was with a simple phone call to the report a poacher line, where this concerned individual, who was a hunter also, mechanic and a hunter, said and knew this wasn't right, and started the investigation with this one call to the report a poacher line.
Yeah, kind of escalated very as
Yeah.
as a
Yeah, and then we
mechanic. I
had-
will say,
yeah.
we need cash to
Yeah,
keep from buying our
exactly.
tools and parts.
Yeah.
Cash
Yeah.
is king.
Yeah.
So-
And I had another one where they were going out. We got some information that he was going out and just after very large whitetail bucks and with a crossbow at night. So he was out hunting, night hunting, but under the guise of darkness and with a crossbow so nobody would hear him. And we spent a large amount of time, following him, and eventually, ended up getting him with, I think it was like four large whitetail bucks. And we're talking like 180 plus Boone and Crockett bucks, and then 2 large bull elk. And then he had shot some other ones that he'd gotten rid of. So these were guys that were like your bad poachers that are, going out and abusing their rights. So, but yeah, there's quite a number of, fairly large, cases, dealing with one where we'd had one that started off where, a person had went with a friend to a guy's place, and the guy had offered to sell him a quarter of elk and that he had hanging, and he said, gee, there's there was an elk and a moose hanging there. And the investigation spanned over 2 years. And then when, searches were eventually done, and it ended up involving, an undercover officer and stuff. At the end of it, hundreds of illegal animals had been taken, from this, group of traffickers. So,
and 2 years,
yeah.
like hundreds of animals. That's
Yeah,
multiple
and
animals every month.
Yeah, and
Wow.
these are, shouldn't say like relatively common, but there's a number of these that happen, every year, throughout the province, with large groups of people, poaching rings going out and shooting large numbers, of animals.
That's my new excuse why I didn't come home with anything.
Yeah.
The poachers are out.
Well, I think there must be like some pretty good numbers. Because I was just talking to a meat processor today out towards the Crow's Nest Pass, and they had 200 deer in there right now to be processed.
Wow!
So I'm going, yeah. So I think it's been the last few days with some of the snow and stuff. It's been a relatively good year down here for deer numbers.
Yeah,
considering the CWD and then some of the other diseases they're facing. So,
what's the relationship like with wildlife researchers, biologists, and game wardens?
Oh, Derek, we have a really close relationship with the biologists. So the way laws work is, and they're the ones that decide on numbers, right? They decide on, whether we're going to have a season or how many, mule deer bucks are going to be taken in a particular zone. So we work really close with them they decide how many, and then it's our job to go and enforce those numbers. So we have to have a good relationship with them, and not always do we agree with them because because some of these numbers are so outdated, where they might do a survey for antelope or deer, and they're using the numbers in 2025 from an aerial survey that happened 6 or 7 years ago. So sometimes we, from a field perspective, we'll go to them and go, hey, listen, there's a way more deer than you think, or there's more grizzly bears than you think, because our numbers of occurrences are going up, but their surveys are telling them, that the numbers aren't there, but sometimes these numbers are really old, that they're getting from years. But yeah, until recently, we were housed in the same offices as they were. So every coffee break we would go, and it was interesting. We would discuss, and for me, it was always important to understand a reason for a law. So, when they would have 3-point, when you might not even remember this, but years ago, there was a 3-point rule for mule deer. So you can only shoot mule deer 3-point. So we're going from an enforcement perspective, I needed to understand how that come about. So we would talk and they would explain to us the reason for, 3-point rules or whatever. So now they're actually in a different department than us even. So we're in the sheriff's branch for the enforcement one, and they're in environment. So we're in complete different departments. So I think that our relationships aren't as close as they once were, and but
That's
still we got to work. Very unfortunate, but still we still work extremely closely with them, fisheries and wildlife.
Yeah, so obviously numbers are a very important thing to have. So the more counts, the more research we can get out there, the better we're able to manage and conserve.
And then budgets are a big thing when you get the political will of one leader that might be in that wildlife isn't important, so the budgets are cut. So then once the budgets are cut, the aircraft patrols for doing aerial surveys for antelope or moose in the winter are cut. So then you start getting dated information. So, but yeah, so there's lots of variables when it comes to that.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
What
I
is
got
the
one.
ratio of field time to desk time as a game warden? I think most outdoors people kind of admire the position of game warden because you get to be outside all the time. But the back of my mind, I know there's unfortunately paperwork is
Yeah.
the detriment to most professions.
Yeah.
What is that like
Yeah.
as a game warden?
So it's probably even getting worse nowadays because of the amount of time you're caught up in court situations. So the way our job works is, we spend a lot of every district's a little bit different, but say we spend 50% of our time on problem wildlife and 50% on enforcement. So
Hmm.
so with the enforcement portion, once you lay a ticket on somebody, issue a ticket, then you have all the court procedures to go through. You got to do your prosecution reports to the prosecutor, and you got to swear your tickets, and then you got to do your time sheets, and
Hmm.
so I would say that a normal officer would probably spend 75% in the field, either dealing with problem wildlife and enforcement, and it might seem pretty high, but I'm sure it's probably around that 25% of your time would be doing administrative stuff, all the reports that are involved now,
Hmm.
and entering data into computers, and it's like probably the job you guys do, where there's always paperwork involved
Yeah, yeah,
with anything you do.
yeah.
So it's
Unfortunately, well,
unfortunately, yeah,
at least that's the majority of the time. Someone's out in the field and outside.
yeah, yeah.
That's good to
And
hear.
then
That.
the good days are the days you can get out into the field and do
Hmm.
that, and your paperwork's all done, and you're able to get out and actually talk with the resource users. And we're really lucky with the job as a fish and wildlife officer, where most of the people we deal with on a daily basis are law-abiding sportsmen.
Hmm.
We'll go and we'll have a chat about their hunt, and geez, they'll have a nice big buck, and you get to hear their stories. And
Yeah.
so it where, like,
You
say
you
for
get to
instance,
see like a father and son, father and daughter.
yeah, yeah,
Drag that
and but
first animal home that the child got, and
yeah,
grandpa's out there with them
yeah.
too, and
So
yeah.
where you get, say, for instance, a traffic sheriff, his every one of his dealings with the public is on an enforcement basis, because the only
Mm-hmm.
reason that guy is getting stopped is because he was speeding. So it's
Yeah.
more of a negative interaction, where ours, fortunately, most of the time are law-abiding people that really care about the resource, and
Mm-hmm.
we get quite a bit of respect in the field, and yeah, so it's a good job that way.
Well, it's
So
also good.
when you're out in the field, sorry to jump in, Derek.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So is it like during hunting season, you obviously want to deal with the hunting, but is it like today we're going to go on this lake to do, or if you're on the fishing side, do you stay on the fishing side, or do you jump around? How does that situation work?
So we might start the day, Mike, where we want to go do a hunting patrol. So then, as we're out doing the hunting patrol, and especially this time of the year would be a prime example, where we have, say, the whitefish are spawning. So then we get the people that are illegally snagging whitefish. So we might get a complaint where, geez, you better get up to McGregor Lake, because there's a whole bunch of individuals out there snagging whitefish and taking over limits. So then we kind of go where the public complaints are. So if we get a public complaint, that's our priority. And our number one priority is public safety.
Mm-hmm.
And with this Bella Coola deal, we're still dealing with bears. So if there's a bear situation, then that would trump our hunter.
Oh, froze.
Well, hopefully we can get him back. I'm not sure what happened there. Well,
Technical difficulties. This will
Yeah.
help. We shall
Yeah.
over.
Oh,
Hold on.
oh,
There we go.
Max.
We're back.
I think we
Yeah.
got him back. You froze up there
Yeah.
for a moment.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so our job, our duties kind of are dictated by where the complaints are, and then this time of the year we even get involved with like search and rescues where hunters will be overdue, and then because of our knowledge of the area and our equipment that we have available to us, that a lot of times like RCMP might not have quads or boats that are available to them, then we're
Yep.
called upon to go help them with that type of stuff. So
And
every
you
day
guys
is
know the
different.
trails and the roads
Yeah.
much better than them anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, especially in October and November, where our day could be anything from dealing with a bear fatality to hunter checks to illegal fishing to so you start off of the day with good intentions of going checking hunters, but by the end of the day, a lot of things could have have changed in that time.
Mhm.
I got one question about predator hunting. Because I have coyotes that are driving me nuts all of the time, but only at night. And I know I would never shoot one at night, but I understand with the laws, how they were written at the time, you couldn't really see unless you had a massive spotlight. But given the advance of like night vision optics and thermal optics, what would you be against? Like, if they were going to open that up, what would your detractions be to allowing that?
Well, predator hunting like that's a little bit different in my view and stuff. So especially on somebody like yourself that might be a landowner that's dealing with, problems with, coyotes during calving or anything like that. So with anything, and we haven't dealt with that too much, Mike, but I can't see, and again, you'll get the abusers that, that would go out and do some illegal things with it. But from what you're saying with it, I wouldn't have, a lot of issues with that. It's just, especially you, if as a landowner know the area and know that you could shoot in a direction that would be safe for your neighbors. And the biggest thing with night hunting is the safety aspect of it, because as you know from ballistic experts, how far a bullet can travel. So it's the biggest issue I would have would be from a human safety perspective.
Because the price of thermal optics is going quite down. I'm actually really in support of the night hunting part of it. That's why I'm asking for your opinion on it.
Yeah.
But the law's gonna take forever to catch up with it, unfortunately. But
exactly, yeah. So can I ask you a question? Like, what would be you're saying the price is going down, so what would a good quality like thermal scope cost now?
Oh, you could probably get either like a clip-on thermal unit or a dedicated thermal between $2,500 to $5,000.
Okay.
As opposed to say traditionally it'd be only the military would even have something remotely close to that. But
so when some of these videos you watch about them hunting boars in the United States, that would
watching
be the type
boars, even watching hunting boars in Italy and stuff like that. They'll do night stalks and stuff like that with thermal optics at night.
Okay.
It's a very different kind of hunting that I would like to experience at one point.
Yeah. When you see some of that stuff with the boar hunting, I'm the same way. I'd like to experience that too.
Have you had to deal much with boars in Alberta at all, or?
Yeah, we did. We dealt quite a bit with them when everything crashed with the boars. That when I was in Sundre, we had a number of different operations that had the Russian boars, and then when the market went for shit on it, and they basically just let these things out, and we would get, and especially around there, and now it's all over, but we would get called out just to see the damage that they would do overnight. And if you've never seen the damage that, a group of boars can do overnight, it's like a big cultivator going into a field. It's amazing. So then agriculture, they hired one of he was a retired fish and wildlife officer that went out. So they tried hiring some guys for going out and shooting them. And then they, ended up setting up traps for them to try and control them. But I think the numbers have exploded so much now that, and to try and hunt them, they're fairly nocturnal animals. So to be successful with them, you almost need to do that at night. So that was the extent of our, involvement with the wild boars, because they weren't considered wildlife. So then they were considered, under agriculture, and they dealt with it more.
It's essentially escaped livestock.
Yeah, an agricultural pest. Yeah. So it was, so.
Okay.
That all segued nicely together, because that's where I was kind of going with it. Is
yeah.
People say that it's a huge problem, and then on the other hand, it's no one's ever seen them, so how are they a huge problem? But there's obviously a hole in the dirt somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a lot of them out there and stuff that cause a lot of damage in certain places. So he said, I've seen it firsthand, and I couldn't believe it when I seen it. The damage they'll do overnight.
I think Elk Island, they had a big problem with it maybe a year or two ago, they were saying.
Yeah.
Just up by
I think
Edmonton.
they go all over it. Yeah, it's they, like when we were in Sundre, they had a lot of it around there, and I think it's moving all over now. So I don't think down here
hit with that pretty hard.
Yeah, and I don't think in southern Alberta we've seen it yet. At least while I was still working, and I haven't heard from some of the guys I keep in contact with about any kind of pig problems down here at all.
I got one more question for you. You competed in the World Police and Fire Games in Calgary. What was that experience like?
Oh, geez, it was a great experience. And I think I told you back in about 1998, we got issued sidearms. But just before that, the political climate at the time thought, well, geez, how can fish and wildlife officers be proficient in sidearms? Only police are proficient in sidearms. So a group of us started going into different competitions just to show the politicians that we were capable of safely handling firearms, and we could be very proficient in handling firearms. So we went in a number of different competitions, and we ended up winning a number of different competitions when we were in police combat shooting, and then we would go in these, they're called like interagency small arm competitions, where and to this day it still happens, where they have a competition each year for law enforcement, where you go in and you'll do some different shotgun shooting scenarios, long range shooting, pistol, and then they kind of compile the scores. And a few years ago, Fish and Wildlife got second place out of every every agency in Alberta.
Nice.
So but anyways, so we competed in the World Police Games, in fact, the International Police Games and then the World Police Games. And for that reason, just to show that we were capable of, safely and being proficient with sidearms. So it was a great experience, shooting beside, policemen from Australia or New Zealand or Fiji or wherever it was, over the thing. So it was, in fact, I got a a plaque still on my wall here that for the the World Police Games, because it's something that what was always very memorable for me. So it was just to do that and experience that once in a lifetime thing was remarkable.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I get to demonstrate some skills outside the job and interact with all those other law enforcement professionals.
Yeah, and we even had, in one of the ones, the international ones, the government supported us, where they got us all these shooting uniforms, and some time to compete in this, and yeah, so yeah, we had a lot of support from our own department for doing this. So, but yeah,
Hmm.
thanks for asking that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
a good topic to touch on.
yeah.
I got probably one more, and then we'll probably wrap it up here. What was a case that unfortunately went unsolved that if you had a magic wand, you could solve?
Oh. Oh boy, it was one I spent, and still I can't really talk a whole lot about it, but I spent a lot of time working on a group of people that were, and I had good information that they were taking large amounts of deer in wrong zones
Mm,
and under different allocations, and I spent I spent an enormous amount of a number of falls, working on that case, and at the end of the day, um, I ended up with nothing on it except some good intelligence and in the meantime, I was transferred from the area,
oh
and
yeah, so
so, but I left all the information. I had a whole bunch of really good intelligence on, where they were going and how they were abusing the system, and a number of different things. And I was very close to being able to lay charges, but not quite enough to prove it in a court of law. So
mm,
it's kind of a complicated one that and hopefully it's still ongoing,
mm,
and but it's one that I lost a lot of sleep with overnight, because I knew it was going on, and a lot of it was fairly blatant, and
yeah,
it was one of those ones that unfortunately I never could solve, Derek.
yeah. You were getting very close, but you didn't have that
Yeah,
threshold of evidence just yet.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
within arm's reach, but just a little bit
yeah,
past arm's
yeah,
reach.
yeah, yeah. So it's and this individual has talked to other people, about my, investigation and stuff. So at least at the end of the day, he knows that we were hard after him, and
Yeah,
hopefully at the end of the day, he learns from it and ends up, stopping his activities. But I kind of doubted on this one.
yeah. Might need a little bit more than just a little bit of eyes on him. Mhm.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
probably wake up in the middle of the night tonight thinking about, oh, I should have tried that.
I was gonna frame that. I was gonna also try to frame the question that way. Is what's a case that still wakes you up at night?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. A few of those. Usually, it's some of the bear maulings that wake me up in the middle of the night. But tonight it'll be that. Tonight it'll be that poaching incident. So,
Okay, well, hopefully that's a little bit less stressful to wake up to. I hope.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, after retiring, I went and taught at the college for 3 years. With some of the new up and coming game wardens that are coming up, and it's
Mhm.
kind of neat to see them out in the field now and going. So yeah, I have a lot less sleepless nights now.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
You got any questions there, Mike, before we wrap it up?
I think we covered all mine.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Well,
Perfect. Well, yeah. Well, if you want a good read, yeah, yeah, have a look at that book and stuff. It's
I was about to say we'll show the book
perfect.
again. I put the Amazon link in earlier. It's called
Oh, you did? Okay.
Alberta Game Warden Behind the Badge of 172. You can find it on Amazon. I have not finished it, but I got about 5/8 of the way through. It is a good read. So I suggest to our readers to find it on Amazon, buy it, and also there's your Facebook page by about the same title where they can follow you.
Right.
So to our listeners, go ahead and do that. And I'd like to thank Jim for coming on, spending the time with us. It's
Thank you,
been a
guys.
great time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on your show. Yeah, it's I've learned a lot from watching your podcast, and I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And we got Yukikazi chiming in. Thank you, Jim. You've been a very interesting guest, and I thank you. So we got
Perfect.
some positive feedback from our listeners. Just want to plug a few things. We also have our Ballistic Speaking podcast. We also have a knife. We all know that working the YouTube grind pays less than a solar farm in a snowstorm. If you want to support the channel directly, head on over to storydknives.com or cdnprecision.com. If you're out east, to pick up one of our Gardner knives. We think this is one of the best survival type / everyday fixed blade knives available for a very reasonable cost. We're pretty proud of it. So please go have a look at a great knife. We'll be confident you'll be on your side for a lifetime. And please check out the show at facebook.com/BS podcast and leave a review to let us know how we're doing. If you like the content, please leave a like on the page and share. Also, email us with any questions you might have. We would love to hear from you. And that is info@bspodcast.ca. And a massive thank you again to all of our sponsors. Without you, we wouldn't have a show in the first place. We're talking about Shane and Steve with EM Precision Rifles, Miles, Carey, and Cappy with call sign 66, Duncan and Rob at Bolt Action Coffee, Phil Odell at Odell Engineering, Doug and Niza with March Scopes Canada, Vanya and Carly with Apex Optics, Oscar with Ribstone Gunsmithing, J.R. Cox with Sterling Arms International. Thank you all in measurable amount. And again, a very big thank you to Jim for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
And, sharing with a lot of good wisdom and a lot of good stories. So again, go out and buy his book for a good read. So, and the last question, is there going to be a second book?
I don't think so. A lot of the stories I had, I wanted to have pictures associated with them to show the story. And I got lots of good stories, but unfortunately, the first half of my career, we had little Polaroid cameras and not the good quality cameras we have today. So I still think of some stories that I would like to write on bear mauling. So potentially there will be, but right now nothing's on print yet.
Okay, just the one book. But anyways, pick it up. And thank you all and have a good night.